The old Victorian mansion stood silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Its windows, like vacant eyes, stared out into the darkness, reflecting the sliver of moon hanging above. The mansion was perched precariously at the edge of a sprawling forest, the ancient trees reaching towards the house like gnarled fingers. A low fog had settled around the grounds, making the old house seem to float above the ground. The only sound that dared to break the eerie silence was the rustling of leaves, carried on the wind like a whispered warning. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Small animals, usually bold in their nightly forays, refused to go near the house. They sensed something amiss, something that sent shivers down their spines and made them scurry to the safety of their burrows. The mansion had stood empty for decades, a monument to forgotten grandeur and whispered rumours. Locals told tales of its troubled past, of a family torn apart by tragedy and a darkness that lingered long after the mourners had left. But tonight, the mansion would have a visitor, a lone figure drawn to the mystery and danger that clung to the house like cobwebs. A journalist named Laura, her curiosity outweighing her fear as she stepped out of her car and onto the overgrown driveway.
Here we go. Let's see what secrets you hold. It's colder than I thought it would be. Why am I always drawn to these places? The unexplained, the mysteries that lurk in the shadows. As a journalist, I seek out stories that send shivers down people's spines, stories that whisper of things beyond the ordinary. But standing here on the brink of the unknown, a flicker of apprehension dances in my heart.
She knew the stories about this house, the whispers that circulated through her small town, painting a grim picture of its history. She had brushed them aside as folklore, the ramblings of superstitious minds. Yet, as she gazed upon the imposing structure, a wave of unease washed over her. The wind howled through the trees, sounding like the mournful cry of a banshee. The branches swayed violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the mansion's crumbling facade.
Maybe I should turn back. No, I've come too far to turn back now. I have a job to do. I have a story to uncover. One step at a time, Laura. You can do this.
Laura took a step toward the house, her boots crunching on the gravel driveway. Each step seemed to echo in the silence, amplifying her solitude. The closer she got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew heavy, pressing down on her like an invisible weight. As she reached the front porch, the weak moonlight revealed the extent of the mansion's decay. The once grand double doors were now warped and cracked, their paint peeling like scabs. The ornate iron railings were rusted and covered in cobwebs, the remnants of some elaborate design barely visible beneath years of neglect. This house was not just old, it was abandoned, forgotten, left to rot. And yet she felt a pull, an undeniable draw towards its darkened interior.
It's just my journalistic curiosity, right? The desire to uncover the truth behind the legends. But it feels like something more. The allure of the unknown, the siren call of a mystery waiting to be unraveled.
With a deep breath, she raised her hand and knocked on the door, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. She waited, but there was no answer. Only the echo of her own heartbeat in her ears.
Okay, here goes nothing.
Laura tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly pushed the door open. It creaked ominously, the sound like a death rattle in the stillness. A musty smell, like that of old books and decaying wood, wafted out, assaulting her senses. She took a step inside, her hand instinctively reaching for the flashlight in her bag. The darkness within was absolute, swallowing the light from her small flashlight. She could feel dust motes dancing in the beam, swirling like tiny phantoms in the stale air.
Ugh, it smells awful in here.
The foyer was cavernous, the high ceiling lost in the shadows above. A grand staircase, once gleaming mahogany, now dull with age and neglect, dominated the far wall. Cobwebs hung from the banisters like macabre decorations, and the portraits that lined the walls were obscured by dust and grime, their subjects staring out with hollow eyes. Laura took a tentative step forward, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. She could hear the sound of her own breathing, amplified in the silence.
There's nothing to be afraid of, Laura. It's just an old house left to decay.
But her heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat of fear against her ribs.